Thanks for staying with us. We're still talking with Amy Emmert about healthcare professionals across the country and right here in our own communities who are working to improve your care and better communication and coordination. So thanks for still being with us, Amy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the position called care coordinator. These are people that work with hospitals, physicians, and other healthcare settings. How do they help the patient?
Yeah, so I guess you could think of a care coordinator as kind of a patient advocate and really that bridge between your provider and the patient. They are going to be working with patients that might be at higher risk for a readmission or just have a lot of complex care needs that are going on, and really trying to figure out, assessing the patient when they're talking to them on the phone or meeting with them in the clinic to make sure that they have the right resources, that we don't necessarily need to, or that we might need to get them connected to something in the community, but then also being that patient advocate. And when they talk to them over the phone and they're assessing them, they are all RNs at St. Peter's Hospital, and realizing that maybe that patient needs to be seen sooner rather than later, and going down the hall and talking to their provider and saying, we really need to get Mr. Smith in, to try to avoid unnecessary visits to the hospital.
We talk a lot on this show about not only the role that healthcare providers play, but also the role that a patient can play too in being their own advocate. So is there things that a patient can do to help with their own care coordination?
Oh, absolutely. So medicine can really only go so far, but we really need to have that patient in the center of our care, making sure that they are able to put their information into the plan of care and making sure that they would be able to succeed in that plan of care. But if they're not engaged in their own care, we can't help them unless they really truly start to understand what's going on in their body. And we're going to be able to put tools out there to help engage them. But we could say, here's a medication that you need to take. But if they don't take it, or they don't understand why they're taking it, or they have side effects and they stop taking it because the side effects are worse than when they weren't taking it before, we need to know that type of information, because otherwise we're just kind of at a loss. So we're going to do our best to try to provide tools that engage them in their own care, but we also need them to meet us at that point.
Sure. And what about their caregivers or the people around them? Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to have a network and the role that network plays in a patient's care coordination?
Network and your social setting is huge. If you don't have, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and that would be true in healthcare as well. If you don't have that team of resources available to you, whether that's a church, a family member, even someone who brings in your newspaper, you really do need someone to have eyes on you, because if you're alone, there might be things that are arising that no one would know about, and you're the only one that would know. And so actually, when we look at patients, people that don't have a lot of connections and resources available to them, we would like to put our resources around them so that they do have that connection back into healthcare.
You mentioned earlier about coming up with a plan when a person is leaving the hospital. So let's say I've been in the hospital, I'm being discharged, I'm given that plan, but there's something in there I don't agree with, or I don't think I am capable of doing. What do I do if I'm concerned about being successful with that plan?
Yeah. Open and honest communication is going to be the key there, but sometimes that's hard. That's hard for patients to be able to admit that maybe they may not be able to afford a medication, or they don't have transportation from home to the clinic. And so our hope is that our care coordinators would build that trusting relationship over time, that patients would be able to divulge that information that we might not necessarily know. And once we know that information, we really can connect patients to resources throughout the community. And there's a lot of resources around the community that are available to patients in need.
Okay, so you just mentioned the community resources. Can you give us some examples of what you mean when you talk about those community resources and the role they can play?
Yeah. So as people change throughout their life, they might need certain aspects of help in whether that's transportation or meals, and we really do have a large resource resources available in the Helena community, and those care coordinators are really trying to connect patients to those resources in need, such as, if the patient came home and they really wanted to stay home and not necessarily go to a nursing home or a skilled nursing facility, but the thing that was holding them back was they're weak. They've been in bed at the hospital and may not have the energy to be able to cook meals for themselves. So a great resource we could connect them to would be Meals on Wheels, where they would deliver the meals to the patient on a daily basis. And not only the meals, but you have that social interaction, and also you have eyes on the patient. If that patient, from this day to the next day looks a little different or a little worse, then we could get that information and check up on them and make sure that they're doing okay.
You mentioned earlier too, talking about medications and making sure that the patient understands what the medication is and why they're taking it. And we know that a lot of reasons behind ending up in the hospital again is because something went wrong with a medication. Mm-hmm. So what can a patient do to make sure they're practicing good medication safety?
Yeah, I think the biggest part is making sure that we are aware of all the medications they are taking. And that includes prescriptions, but also over-the-counter medications. What people don't necessarily realize is how they can react to each other, even if it's as simple as just a vitamin D or St. John's wort or things like that you can find over the counter. So it's really important for us to have that extensive list of what they're taking, but then they also understand when they need to take it, why they're taking it, and side effects to look for. And the side effects is really us telling the patient, watch for these things, and if this occurs, here's what to do or who to call. But then the other part is, as prescriptions change over time, people oftentimes try to hold on to those prescriptions because they think that they might go back on it. But what that actually can do is cause medication errors. People start taking the wrong medication, or they refill the wrong medication, and then when we try to put a plan in place, we may or may not actually have the most accurate list of what we should be prescribing or could be prescribing.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Amy. A lot of good information.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being with us. And coming up next, we'll talk more about care coordination and the role Mountain Pacific Quality Health plays in helping improve care coordination in your state. Stay with us. We'll be back after these messages.